I'll begin with our land acknowledgement. You know, my father always said I could project, but so we'll begin with our land acknowledgement. The London Chamber of Commerce recognizes that the area in which we gather, work, and live is part of the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lupana peoples. We thank the Indigenous peoples' commitment and relationship with the land and waters for knowing that our ongoing survival is connected to the land. I'd like to acknowledge the communities in Circle, the east, south, west, and northern directions. We acknowledge the local First Nations communities in this area, Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation. This region is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. This area is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to establish peaceful cooperation between communities. We share the responsibility with the land's stewards for ensuring that the dish is never empty and for reestablishing relationships based on peace, trust, and friendship. The London Chamber of Commerce is committed to the process of truth and reconciliation. As we begin our journey toward reconciliation, it is essential to understand what that means and how it looks. Reconciliation is more than just admitting mistakes, and listening alone is insufficient. It requires action, and that action takes many forms, including individually and professionally. We acknowledge the historical and ongoing injustices faced by Indigenous peoples in Canada, and we feel responsible to expose and correct misinformation while also renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through amplifying and uplifting Indigenous voices, stories, knowledge, and community service. Reconciliation requires having a good relationship to begin with, and then striving to reconcile it. For many Indigenous peoples, there has never been a healthy relationship. While inequalities, injustices, and power imbalances still exist, we must consider this. Through this understanding, we can begin the rebuilding of friendly relationships. But most importantly, it requires love, respect, and compassion. Now is the time to question existing beliefs and invest in strong relationships. Now is time to bring greetings and introduce our candidates, and I'd like to welcome our Chair of the London Chamber of Commerce's Government Affairs Committee, Jamie Cruspel.
Hot mic. Good morning. How's everybody doing today? My name is Jamie, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to introduce our candidates. And on behalf of the Chamber, I would like to welcome you all here today, including our host, Huron College, and our sponsors, Labatt and Swan Public Affairs. Before we get started with the formal program, you will have noticed that there were some paper and pens on your way in. That is how we're going to handle questions today. So when you get inspired to ask your question, please write it out with your best possible handwriting. You probably want it understood. And one of our many volunteers will come around and grab it. We may not be able to get to all of your questions today. However, it is highly likely that our wonderful candidates are going to stick around afterwards if you want to have another chat. All right, now I'd like to introduce our guests that are with us. They'll have an opportunity in a little bit to introduce themselves in greater detail, but let's first welcome Carol Dyck of the Green Party. Kate Graham of the Liberal Party. And Terence Kernaghan of the NDP. Jerry Pribble unfortunately couldn't join us today, and we all wish him well. And now to get the festivities going, I turn it over to our moderators, Graham Henderson and Kirsten Kroos.
Thank you, Jamie. My name is Graham Henderson, and I'm the CEO of the London Chamber of Commerce.
And I'm Kirsten Kroos, President of Swan Public Affairs.
Today, we will be moderating the Q&A portion of the event and sharing that task.
But first, we will give each candidate the opportunity to introduce themselves. Candidates, you will have 3 minutes to give your opening address. Our timer will raise their hand when you have 30 seconds left and signal the moderators when your time is up.
Where's our timer's hands? The person who's raising his hands. Oh, they're way back up there. Oh, you're going to have to look far. I hope you got good eyesight. But we have that clock. We have that clock just in case.
All right, well, I guess we'll start with the candidates. And Terence, would you like to lead us off, please?
Well, thank you very much, Graham and Kirsten, and I'd like to thank the Chamber as well as Huron University College, Labatt, and Swan for hosting this important event today. I'm your Ontario NDP candidate for London North Centre. I was first elected as MPP in London North Centre 4 years ago, and it's been the honor of my life. I've gotten to meet so many amazing people and get to speak about all of the great things happening here in our wonderful city. You know, we've seen things like the UNESCO World City of Music designation, an absolute wonderful achievement for London. It's really put us on the world stage. You know, at Queen's Park, I've been thrilled to speak about London's film office, to speak about all of the different economic opportunities that are available here. I also met with consul generals from a variety of countries. You know, I think about my conversations with the Consul General of Japan, really speaking to all of the wonderful ways in which the world can invest here in London. London's also been through an incredibly difficult time. You know, we've seen the COVID-19 pandemic has put things into sharp perspective. It's shown us many things that we really need to work on as a province and as a city. But many of these problems didn't happen overnight. They were here long before COVID-19. We need a provincial government that's going to make robust investments to make sure we bring long-term care back under public control, to make sure that social assistance rates are brought above the poverty line, and to make sure that we invest in health care, we strengthen home care, because we know the best place for people to be is in their home. You know, I think that we deserve a government that puts ordinary people first and makes sure that people have more money in their pocket. You know, I'm thrilled to bring all of these great initiatives forward, as well as things like the Green New Democratic Deal, because as Graham has mentioned, with the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, we know that when people have enough, if everyone has enough, then we should have enough to share with one another. And also, as we look towards extractive economies, we need to make sure that we're not taking too much from Mother Earth and leaving enough for generations to come. You know, I believe we have a strong plan. It's been my honor to represent the city, and I look forward to representing once again. Thank you very much.
All right. Next, we'll have Kate.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. And it's really cool to be here. The Chamber has been involved in political action and mobilization for a long time, but I was asking Graham as I was walking in the door today, I don't think something like this has ever happened. You've got 3 events in a row, all of the main London ridings, so it's a huge amount of work to pull off something like that. So to Graham and Kristen and all of the volunteers, thank you for making this possible, and to the folks at the Free Press as well for making it accessible to the community. It's just terrific. So my name is Kate Graham. I am absolutely delighted to be your Ontario Liberal candidate in this election. And, you know, for me, I know that politics matters, right? Nothing affects more people than the decisions that we make. So in August of 2020, my partner Jessie is here. Our world's totally transformed. We welcomed a baby girl. And like all parents, I want my daughter to grow up in an amazing city where she can live a happy, healthy life. For me, that's what this is all about. I want her to have access to top-notch education so she can pursue her biggest dreams. I want to know that our healthcare system is there for her when she needs it. I want her to live in a city where she can explore her passions, where there's amazing arts and culture and athletic opportunities. I want her to live in a city where she's safe, a city where she belongs, and a city where if she finds herself or others around her in struggle, where we really take care of one another. And you know, none of those things happen on their own. They are the result of the choices that we make. So for me, that's why I'm on this stage. That's why I'm running in this race. You know, I ran for the first time in 2018. It was a big leap for me. I'd spent 10 years working at the City of London and decided to run for office. And it turned out to be the worst election in the Ontario Liberal Party's history, right? Every single new candidate, me included, lost. Almost the entire caucus lost. And you know, it's a really healthy thing to have happen to a party every once in a while, because it forces the party to take a good hard look in the mirror and say, who are we and what do we care about? So I've been a big part of that process personally as a volunteer. A week after the election, I led a province-wide listening exercise to understand where we lost our way. I ran for leader, and for the last year and a half, together with our leader, Stephen Del Duca, I've led our platform work across the province, which means like 1 million Zoom meetings with people all across the province who have expertise and experiences that we don't. And that's how we've built the plan that we're running on. I am really proud of our platform because it reflects tens of thousands of fingerprints of people across this province who understand the challenges that we face, and were prepared when we invited them in to help us rebuild, help us focus on the things that matter most to people. So I know today we're going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about education, healthcare, long-term care. How do we support people living in poverty? All of these are the topics that we should be focused on in this election, and I'm really delighted. I'll end where I started. I'm delighted today that the Chamber has convened us to have an important conversation about where we go as a city and as a province.
Go ahead. Okay. Hi, I am Carol Dyck, the Green Party candidate for London North Centre. First of all, a huge thank you to the London Chamber of Commerce for inviting us here today to have this discussion. Urban planning and urban sustainability is a real passion of mine, so I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're about to have. So I am actually a PhD student at the moment. I am studying law in international environmental law with a focus on marine law. I am also an active community volunteer. I sit on boards in London for local nonprofits that promote sustainability and arts and culture in London, Ontario. This election right now, I think, is a truly pivotal one. It is going to determine the direction that we go and how we build our cities. And to me, it is absolutely impossible to separate the environment and London's resiliency from our economy. We have seen in British Columbia how quickly we can lose something with Lytton that was completely razed, or with Abbotsford and Merritt that were flooded completely. Businesses lost, farms lost, homes lost. So when we think about the economic planning that we're going to do, we absolutely have to incorporate sustainability and resiliency into our plans. We already see that the City of London has accepted this and is planning on putting forward the Climate Emergency Action Plan. And the Green Party of Ontario wants to partner with the city to make that a reality, to make it happen. At the moment, too often, the province has downloaded things onto the municipalities and they can't offer the services that they need to really attack the issues of people that are suffering from being unhoused, addictions, small businesses that are struggling to keep their doors open, transportation problems. We can work with the city to make these things happen and really make the cities vibrant. We have plans to create connected, affordable, sustainable communities where people can walk within 15 minutes to places to work, to shop, to play. We want to have green spaces within 10 minutes of every person because we know that green spaces have been so important to people's mental well-being during the pandemic. So I really look forward to this conversation, and I'm hoping that we can, really think about how we want our cities to look in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, each one of you. Just before we go to our question and answer period, I do want to commend the three of you for what you're doing. the decision to run for office and to serve is not an easy one, and I think it's become more difficult in our current era. So kudos to you. Thank you for what you've done and what you want to do. Now we'll proceed. Kirsten and I are going to sort of swap back and forth with questions. Our timer, distant as he is, will be paying attention. You have 2 minutes, and we'll try to switch up the order so that it's not always the same. Kirsten, would you like to begin with the first question?
Sure. This is by Brent Furtney, Libro Credit Union. Do we want to just open it up to all of them to answer?
Yeah, I think everybody that's what we're doing, right? Yeah, everybody has 2 minutes to answer each question.
Perfect. So here's the question. How would you and your party combat rising inequality and wealth gaps within the province? Terence, I'll start with you.
Well, part of addressing inequality is making sure that people have a safe place to call home. The Ontario NDP released our Homes You Can Afford plan almost a year and a half ago, and it's something that we've seen the province lacking, and that would be for the province to be in the business of building affordable housing. I think if you don't have a safe place to call home, it's impossible to build a life. We also need to make sure that we have robust investments in mental health. With the Ontario NDP, we have a plan to make sure that everyone with their health card will be able to access counseling and therapy. In this way, we have a system where there are great service providers, but unfortunately, many of mental health care issues aren't addressed until they're in an emergency situation. And that is not efficient, nor is it cost effective. We also need to make sure that we are raising social assistance rates, because if people do not have enough money to have a safe place to call home, then it's impossible to be healthy. It's impossible to work. It's impossible to have a robust economy. So really these are critical quality of life issues. But also we need to make sure that we take a look at the future of work. As we take a look towards our responsibilities on this planet, we also have our Green New Democratic Deal, which will create 1 million good-paying jobs with benefits. We need to take a look at the current stock that we have, whether it is in provincially owned properties. We saw the sale, the closure and sale of the London Psychiatric Hospital. That would have been a great location to build social and affordable housing. But unfortunately, all of the people in that location were promised spaces within the community, spaces that were never created. We see such struggles in downtown, and in order to make downtown vibrant again, we need a provincial government that is on side building affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Terence. I'll go to you, Kate.
Sure. So it's a great question, and I know you see this at Libro, and we see this, unfortunately, in London and all across the province. The gap between rich and poor is getting larger, right? You can use a Gini coefficient or other ways to measure this, but we see this polarization happening. And one of the consistent things you will see in our platform from issue to issue is we need to take from those who have done extremely well and make sure that the benefits are more shared. So let me give you a couple of examples. In our plan, we are including increasing a tax on the wealthiest, people who gross more than $500,000 a year, as a way to provide more support, deeply affordable housing, making sure we've got more mental health support, increasing social assistance rates for people who are struggling the most. You will see that we are taking the tax, the HST we all pay, on prepared foods under $20, but instead of us paying for that as taxpayers, we believe the Loblaws of the world, those who've grossed more than $1 billion a year in profit, they should be paying for that tax. There's something about people who are sitting on vacant properties. I will tell you, in my head, I call this the FARI tax in my own mind. The FARI tax, where we are taking money from those who have done very well. They've seen their assets really appreciate, and we would invest all of that in more affordable housing. There are a number of other things we can do as government. So we've committed to moving towards a living wage. We believe minimum wage is an old idea. Its death is coming under a Liberal government. We need to move away from this idea that we set up regimes about the least you can pay people, and instead move towards what's the basic amount that someone could reasonably be expected to live on. I will say that our plan includes a lot of things really targeted to address that growing polarization, make sure that more people are able to benefit from the growth and prosperity that we have as a province. And again, we've got an almost 100-page platform you can find at votecate.ca that includes that basic recipe of saying where we see this happening, we need to bring it in and make sure more people are living a happy, healthy life.
Thank you very much, Kate. And Carol, on to you.
Okay, so the core of the Green Party policy and our platform is to create caring societies. For us, that is everything. So there are many ways that some of the, we have agreements with the people on stage with Kate and Terence's policies. So of course we too would put an empty building tax to make sure that, you know, buildings aren't sitting empty, being taken off the market and not being used for proper purpose. We also would have a speculation tax that would go on homeowners that own 3, 4, 5 houses. Because again, these are either being bought to become Airbnbs or they're sitting empty and they're taking them off the market, forcing people farther outside the city so that they have longer commutes. And as we all know right now, the price of gas is astronomical. But at its core, we really need to think about those that are most vulnerable in our society, and those would be people that are currently living with a disability. Since September 2021, the Green Party has said that they would double the ODSP payments, and we have been steadfast with that. When the license plate sticker tax was voted on and the rebates came, only one MPP voted against that, and that was Mike Schreiner, and he said that that money could go towards doubling ODSP. And there are other issues we need to deal with as well, and that is right now the rising cost of food. Through my work, I have seen children that are going without breakfast and that go without lunches. Our program that we are putting forward is a healthy lunch program in all the schools because children cannot learn if they are hungry. This is absolutely fundamental that they should have food so that they can feel secure. And then as far as housing, we need to make sure that we have units that are safe and affordable. And one of the issues with that is dealing with energy costs. A lot of people that are lower income can't afford to retrofit their homes. And because of that, they get caught in a cycle, a trap, where they are paying more for their energy bills because they can't save energy. We would help them with up to $15,000 grants to lower their energy bills.
Thank you very much.
Wow. You guys are amazing. Everything's under 2 minutes, right on time. Perfectly packaged little nuggets of information. Wow. So the questions that we have today are a mix of coming from the audience and also coming from our members who submitted these in advance. So I'm going to ask one from the membership, and it's about labor and labor shortages. 62% of business sectors in Ontario are currently facing labor shortages and job vacancies. And I know for London businesses, this is a big, big issue. How will your party ensure that businesses are able to access the talent they need to fill those jobs? And I just add my own thought on that. We are at Huron University, which is a school with lots of international students. Our understanding is that there is a gap between how we're connecting international students with local businesses. So let's mix it up. We'll start with Kate, go to Carol, and Terence, you'll hit back up.
Okay. Well, I don't want to start this one off in too dark of a place, but the reality is that we are at the beginning right now of one of the largest demographic shifts in our history, right? For the first time, we will have more people retiring than in the workforce. And that was before the pandemic, right? We've seen major changes and some sectors having huge pressure. You know, you talk to a home builder and they are rapidly increasing the amount they're paying, for example, a general laborer, and can't find people in the work. If you have had to go to the emergency room at LHSC, you will know that there are staffing shortages almost every day where there just are not enough people to be able to keep up with the demand. We're now the fastest growing city in Ontario, and so there is going to be added pressure on all of these systems. So we as a party understand that and know that a big part of being able to address these gaps is making sure that we are taking care of workers. So I've already mentioned the living wage. That's one of our main commitments. Another thing, and I actually think this is maybe one of the most transformative ideas in the whole platform, is about a portable benefits package for all workers. So right now, if someone has multiple employers or through their career they travel from kind of job to job, or maybe they work in a creative industry, instead of having benefits be tied to your employer, the idea here is that benefits are tied to the person. and they travel with you as you go through your career and from employer to employer. And that is transformative for a lot of people. So there are things that we need to do specific to each sector. We know we need to be recruiting more people into the trades, and we've got plans to do that. We know in healthcare, health human resources, we are committing to things like making tuition free for people who are willing to, for example, train as a nurse or a PSW, especially if they're willing to commit to working in remote and rural areas. So supporting workers, making sure that workers have what they need to be able to do the jobs that we're expecting of them, and then really targeting our recruitment strategies to sectors where we know there's a great need. This would include internationally trained professionals as well as students coming in, really easing those pathways to make sure that they're able to contribute in a field that they love and where we've got need as a city and as a province.
All right. So I'm going to focus on two particular areas. And first of all, just, I guess, 2 weeks ago now or so, Mike Schreiner announced that he would be offering 60,000 students free tuition to go into the trades. Right now, we obviously need to build a lot of housing. There are huge wait times for people that need to have work done on their home, and we need to fill those gaps. So it's not just the free tuition, though. It's also 1 year guaranteed work afterwards to get them ready to have the experience they need to enter the workforce. The other issue we absolutely have to talk about is nurses, just like Kate mentioned. Right now, we have an absolute shortage of nurses, and a lot of that is because of burnout and because the government has not supported them in the last 2 years. They frequently said that they were heroes, and yet they capped their wages with Bill 124. That has to be repealed immediately so that we can make sure that nurses are being paid what they are due. We also have a plan to give them an extra bonus if they are working on a short-staffed ward that night or during the day. We have plans to give them mental health care supports absolutely free, because at this point, a lot of them are so worn out that they cannot continue on. We're not going to have retention. We need to create the work environment for nurses that new students will want to enter that field. Right now, there would be no reason to do that because they are overworked and underpaid and appreciated by their government. We have plans to invest in getting more nursing students into the universities, and we want to increase it by 33,000 nurses in the next 7 years, but we can only do that if we have their backs.
You know, I first entered politics because as a former educator, I saw so many students that they had all the aptitude, they had all of the desire, they had all of the drive, but if they weren't born in the right place with the right last name, they would not be given the opportunity to go on to post-secondary education. Ontario is the richest province in Canada, and yet we spend the least amount on education, the least amount on healthcare. That must change. You know, in order for Ontario to not be last, we'd have to increase expenditure on post-secondary education by 35%. That's not to be first. That's simply not to be last. But London also has a great workforce. We have many skilled people, many educated people, and I'd like to see yet more. The Ontario NDP plan is to make sure that we turn student loans into grants so that nobody graduates with debt. That will be a game changer for folks. We also want to see more robust investments on the front lines of healthcare. Our plan is to hire 30,000 nurses and 10,000 PSWs and pay them properly for once. Scrapping Bill 124 is a good start, but we also know that nurses have not received a raise in over 10 years. And that comes from the last government's austerity budgets. We know that mental health care funding was frozen, and as well as health care funding. But another great equalizer is childcare. The pandemic has also exposed the disparity in work. You know, there are many women at home who were not only juggling the struggles of childcare, online learning, but also trying to do their job. So in order to have a really robust workforce, we need to make sure that women are able to participate fully. We look at programs such as those found in Quebec, which was a publicly funded childcare system, which actually paid for itself. These are great investments that we need to make sure London is on the center stage, on the world stage.
All right, thank you for that. So the next question is from Carol Walters and the Alzheimer's Society. So I I am one of the millions of Ontarians who has a direct connection with dementia, a disease that takes over 250,000 people. A disease that over 250,000 people live with across the province. My question to all of you is, what is in each of your platforms that would help people living with dementia and their care partners? So I'll change up. I'll start with Carol.
Yeah. So we actually, in the Green Party platform, have an entire section dedicated to this issue. For us, we really feel like it's important to make sure that people can live in their homes safely and securely. And we really want to increase the supports by 20% with the budget to be able to have the people that are caring for them look after the person at home, because that is really what is best for them. It's actually more cost effective, and it is, for their overall well-being much better. My own grandmother also passed away with dementia, and I know that being moved from place to place really destroyed her well-being. She was in one location, and as soon as her symptoms got to a certain level, they're like, nope, she can't be here, even though that's where her friends were. It's what she knew. It's what she understood. They moved her somewhere else. Within 2 months, she passed away because she was confused and didn't understand what was happening. We need to make sure that, especially with the way the system is right now with the long-term care homes, there is problems with shortages in the amount of time, the face-to-face time that people have. We want to make sure that there's a guaranteed 4 hours of personal and nurse time every single day for all patients. And we would increase the ratios for the PSWs, nurses, nurse practitioners within the long-term care centers. But at its core, as I say, it must be that there is supports for those that are taking care of their loved ones at home. That includes respite so that they can have breaks. We have heard the heartbreaking stories of people, because often it is seniors that are looking after their loved one. They already have their own health issues and they get tired. So if they don't have supports, they will often drop the person with dementia off at the hospital in the emergency care. This is unacceptable. We need to make sure that there are respite options for those that are caring for others. And that can also include a universal basic income so that you can stay home away from your work and still pay your bills.
Dementia is something that robs people of their loved ones, and it's something that is growing year upon year upon year. We need far more provincial investments to make sure that we can keep our loved ones with us as long as possible. Part of that is through home care. We need to make sure that there is funding in place to make sure that it is a public system. We saw that past governments have privatized the system, and unfortunately people are not getting the care that they need and deserve. Oftentimes there'll be PSWs who show up who are different each time. That means the families have to retrain them. It's not as though the PSWs don't care or as though they're not qualified, but it's simply that there's not that relationship. So we need to make sure that we have a strengthened home care system to make sure that people are able to stay in their homes as long as possible, because home is where you're healthiest. But in the absence of that, or actually in addition to that, we also need to make sure that those care partners, those people who are often taking time off from work, who are caring for their loved ones and making sure that they're well looked after, also have some support from the government. We're calling for an additional fund of $400 a month for those care partners, because we know there's also an economic impact from them not being able to fully participate in the world of work. But the Alzheimer's Society has created a wonderful system with the First Link Care Partner system, and it's truly wonderful. We need to make sure that there are provincial investments in addition to that to shore up the system. But with long-term care, when that is something that is the only option, we've seen that governments have unfortunately privatized that. And we've seen the horrors that have happened when the Army had to go in to rescue seniors who were calling out for help. We need to bring that entire system back under public control, make sure nobody is profiting off of somebody's old age, and someone is being treated with the care, respect, and dignity that they deserve. It has been a human rights crisis, what we've seen, and that is the NDP plan, is to make sure that everyone is cared for with respect.
So let me start with a question for you, just out of curiosity. How many of you have a personal connection to Alzheimer's in your own family? Yeah, so for those watching at home, that's maybe 3/4 of the room. Like Carol, this is a really personal question for me as well. I had 2 grandparents who passed away during the pandemic, both in long-term care. My grandfather had Alzheimer's, dementia, And after years of marriage, they had to be put in different facilities because they had different needs. And I can tell you, and maybe some of you have had this experience, unfortunately, tens of thousands of people have had this experience, saying goodbye to a loved one on a Zoom funeral over the last few years. Like, there is a trauma to that, right? That we as a society, we as families, we as people who care about their loved ones and see the struggles that they're dealing with have been going through. So this is a moment where we have to fix this, right? This has been a broken system for a long time. I'm glad to hear unison on this stage, and I think across most of the parties in this election, that we need to change this. So our plan is transformative. We are moving away from what's often called the warehouse model, these big kind of hospital-like settings where we invest in the number of beds, a phrase I absolutely hate, by the way, as if it's just a bed for someone to sit for their final days, and instead helping people age where they are. So that includes a home care guarantee, where we would be paying PSWs a grid starting at $25, by the way, so that they can get access to the same care they would get in long-term care at home. This will be transformative for many, many families who would like to age in place. Also, lots of support for caregivers, for home renovations, for making the purchasing assistive devices, things that are needed to help people stay at home. And then where there is a higher need, for example, my grandfather, would not have worked for him, moving more towards what we see in the Scandinavian countries, which is smaller, think like 4 to 12 units in a neighborhood where there's care on site, and it feels more like home. It's a better model of care. The outcomes that people experience health-wise are much better, and it's a much better plan for people and families in London and across the province.
Thank you so much for those very, very empathetic answers. Let's switch it up a little bit here. London is blessed with a rather extraordinary bounty of some of the best farmland in the world, I would say. We're surrounded by this. Between 1996 and 2016, Ontario lost 1.5 million acres of farmland in our province and continues to lose 175 acres of productive farmland every day. Most farms around here are about 150 acres, so that's one farm going every single day, an average of 5 farms a week. What will your party do to protect farmland in Ontario before its ongoing loss significantly impacts our local food supply chain? This question came from our membership. Why don't we start, Terence, with you, and then Kate and Carol.
Agri-foods is one of London's strongest economic drivers because of our proximity to great farmland. We need to make sure that we protect that farmland, because once that is paved over, it's very difficult to get that back. I think we also need to make sure that we're protecting the green belt. We need to make sure we are curbing urban sprawl. We should be building inwards and upwards, in our core, making sure that there's vitality and life. Unfortunately, the government currently, the Ford government, has talked about Highway 413. And we've heard that developers say, well, we can simply replace wetlands. But we know with the biodiversity and the importance of wetlands that they cannot be manufactured, they cannot be recreated. So we, with the Ontario NDP, oppose Highway 413 as well as the Bradford bypass, because urban sprawl and more highways just create further congestion. I think it's important that all parties stand up and oppose, these useless highways. We need to make sure that also there's going to be agricultural impact assessments, make sure that farmers are consulted. We also need more robust transit throughout southwestern Ontario, because I know from working with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture that there are many great jobs on farms that are unfilled each and every single day. And part of that is that we need a southwestern Ontario transit strategy. We need to make sure we can get those people out to those jobs and back safely. So we need to make sure that we're investing in transit, we're protecting the Greenbelt, and we're making sure that farmers have a seat at the table.
Okay, so I can give you a really precise answer to this question. Right now, 10% of Ontario is protected land, and the Ontario Liberal commitment is that we would bump that up to 30. That would include green spaces and a lot of agricultural land. I mentioned that I've had the privilege of leading our platform process over the last year and a half. And what that's meant is an opportunity to meet with lots of stakeholders. And so last Monday, when we were releasing our platform, I was in Toronto to speak at it, and I called the president of the OFA, someone we've been working closely with, and I let her know that we were going to be making that commitment and a few other things that she and her colleagues had been pushing for that they were in the platform we were about to announce. And she said, I've got goosebumps on my arms, because this is what will protect future generations of being able to enjoy the kind of farmland that we have in Ontario. Our plan goes beyond that, though. It's not just about protecting the land. Similar things to what Terence talked about. We need to look at how we grow cities. We need to look at our transit strategies. We need to make sure that we're building inwards and upwards and in sustainable forms that protects that land. But we also need to do more for the agriculture sector generally. So how many of you feel like your grocery bill gets more expensive literally every time you go to the grocery store? Which is like, for those at home, not surprisingly, every single hand is going up. It's true, right? We are paying more when we're at the grocery store. But if you think that that money is funneling to the food producers, the growers, you would be mistaken. In fact, we see that they are razor-thin margins, and often they are at the whims of these large grocers who sometimes will have a contract with them about what to pay and will change it mid-contract. So we're introducing a grocery code of conduct that includes some teeth so that grocers have to make sure that the benefits of the kind of prices that we are all paying are shared. Again, we'd like to do a few things to make it easier for us as consumers, like taking off HST, but we also need to make sure that our agriculture sector is being paid fairly, that they can pay workers fairly, that they're able to do their work in a sustainable way, do the climate adaptation that we're relying of them. So there's a lot of changes that are needed to our food system, but the punchline for us, protect agricultural land, make sure more of those benefits are shared.
Okay, so the Green Party plan obviously focuses a lot on protecting our natural areas and our farmland. First of all, we are the only party that would immediately freeze the urban boundaries. We've really got a problem right now with sprawl out into our agricultural areas. We are losing a lot of farmland, especially outside of London with this. And one of those major problems is that with people coming in so far, they are driving cars, using gas, contributing to climate change. We have also said that we would prohibit any more expansion into the Greenbelt. We cannot lose any more of the Greenbelt. And on top of that, we would create a blue belt that would protect our wetlands, rivers, lakes. That is another crucial part in our resiliency against climate change. It is also about how we create our cities. I mean, we need to think about going in, just like Terence and Kate have said, we need to think about creating these 15-minute communities where we are having gentle infill. We can have a variety of homes inside the city to make vibrant towns that don't sacrifice our green spaces outside the city. We are also committed to protecting 30% of Ontario's natural spaces by 2030. This is something that's been called from the international community, and we are supposed to do according to our international obligations. And we have been falling behind on that in Canada. So we need to do that. And on top of that, that includes protecting our wetlands. As Terence alluded to, we are seeing, especially in southwestern Ontario, we have lost over 90% of our wetlands. Those wetlands perform huge ecological services for us, including filtering our water, protecting us from floods, and are a huge source of biodiversity. Without those areas, without the green areas, we do not have the insects and the pollinators that we need for our food systems to continue. So we need to make sure that we are looking at a holistic system where we have healthy cities and healthy rural areas.
Thank you very much. So the next question I'm going to kind of steal from Graham because I really like this question. And this question comes out of because there were some passionate people in the city that made some big moves and got some things done. So here's the question. London has recently gained its designation as the first UNESCO City of Music in Canada. This will provide our London representatives at Queen's Park with a unique opportunity to promote and bring funding to our city. If elected or re-elected, what would you do to leverage this opportunity for London? I'll start with you, Kate, and then we'll go Carol and Terence.
Sure. So I'm really jazzed about this. Is that cheesy? I don't know. But it is really exciting to see London identified as the first city in the country to be an internationally acknowledged music city. And I worked at the city for 10 years. One of the things that I was really proud of from my time at the city was creating the music office, hiring Corey Crossman, who has led a big part of this charge with Graham and others to move London in this direction. It's something I also continue to personally be invested in. We sat here just 3 weeks ago. One of my Huron classes, I'm very lucky to teach here at Huron, and I had a class of students who researched cities around the world. What are the things that local governments are doing to really stimulate growth in the music industry? They pitched those ideas to a panel of Graham and the mayor and someone from Music Canada and the team at the city. And the ideas were terrific. And some of them were simple things like business education for music students, making sure that people have the kind of supports that they need to be able to navigate into the sector, do the branding and so on. And some of them were transformative, right? When we build new buildings, there are gyms in those spaces. Maybe there should be quiet spaces where you can learn music. Maybe there should be gyms that are kind of, where you can go and rehearse music. You can play instruments with others. There should be things that help kind of everyday Londoners be able to enjoy their musical talents and also grow those things for people who are interested in pursuing the sector. So I'm going to repeat one idea I talked about earlier that I do think is essential in the creative community, and that is the portable benefits program. So we know for a lot of creative workers right now, their pay is precarious. They don't have access to benefits. It is a main reason why people choose to leave that field. So having a public benefits program that is tied to the employee, not to the employer, make sure that creative workers are able to do the amazing work they do, produce the music that we all love, and that they have the basic things that are needed to protect themselves and their families for the future.
Okay, so this is a topic that, again, is a very personal and important to me. I actually sit on the chair for the Magisteris Soloists, which is a nonprofit organization here in London. And they bring musicians from around the world to play here with our student musicians. They offer opportunities for music in schools when there's not COVID. And they also do music, the Magister at the museum, where they have different themed nights. So I know how hard it is for the Music Society to really get the funds that they need to really bring these programs. We are at this point where we can really create something special in London, but we can only do that with the partnership of the city. With the province. What we have been hearing is that, a lot of the money is going into programs that are in Toronto or the GTA. And we really need to see that money going out into the more medium-sized cities. So we need to have a special fund just for medium cities, because we need to build the infrastructure that will make this truly exciting. And it's not just big locations, but the small venues as well, to provide a wide variety of opportunities. Before the pandemic, there was almost 1,000 people employed in the music industry here in London. And there is a huge economic benefit to all the music that we can bring here. It's not just the music itself, it's the restaurants, it's the hotels, it's the general tourism. This is a huge economic gain for us, and we really need to evaluate that, do a study to find out how much it is worth to the city, present that to the province so that we can then get the investments we need to build the proper structure to create this amazing music city, really vibrant here in London.
There must be really something special about London to be on the forks of the Thames, because there's so much creativity and so much inspiration and so much value here that we have in our city. Whether it's the Lester B. Pearson School for the Arts or H.B. Beale and their wonderful art program, it was such an amazing achievement, and I must commend the Chamber as well as London Economic Development Corporation and the City of London for all of their work in this designation as a UNESCO World City of Music. We also have such a wonderful opportunity, and I'd like to see advanced and increased investments from the province in the arts, because as we've just been noting on this stage, the arts are an economic driver, contributing to tourism, all of the different industries that support artists. We also need to make sure that we have an increased minimum wage. The Ontario NDP is calling for a $20 minimum wage. We know as a result of the pandemic, many businesses had to close. And unfortunately, many people who are involved in the arts were left struggling as a result of not being able to work. So we need to make sure that we are, helping workers achieve their potential, but also fostering that creativity. The London Music Office, as well as the Film Office in London, are really excellent services. The Film Office, being a concierge service, attracting that investment, making sure people know what is available here in London? What is possible here in London? And then when we get all of that additional tourism, you know, I was pleased to also attend the summit that was put on recently, where we learned about London's role in fostering the play Grow. And, you know, really there are so many wonderful things that are happening here in London. I think we are just in this amazing period of growing and inspiring and developing artists, and I look forward to all of the different achievements that London is going to accomplish.
Wow, thank you. I'll come get that in a second, Kirsten. Great question. Thank you for stealing it from me. I have no idea what to ask anymore.
Yeah. We can just keep talking
I've been prepping that one. No, but actually there's a good segue here, and I think it's to a question from our friends at Pillar. One of the important features of the UNESCO designation is that UNESCO actually designed the Cities of Culture program to support their sustainable development goals. And so that's a big underpinning of what that is and how culture can help with human rights and improve human rights. So I have a question from our friends at Pillar, Mojde Cox, who wrote this out before people were admonished to use their best handwriting, because I know it would have been probably block printed. So
It looks long, too.
At Pillar, we speak sometimes of the, quote, shift to the middle, the way businesses increasingly seek positive social impact, and social purpose organizations increasingly embrace business activities to fund their activities through earned revenue and build new communities and support. However, how will you encourage this shift and also support the formation of new purpose-built social enterprises that deliver sustainable social, economic, and environmental benefits to our communities? What is your party's social enterprise strategy for Ontario?
I think it's
And
me.
it's now, yeah, I made a note actually. Hang on, I actually.
I'm pretty sure
it
it's
is
me.
Carol and
Yes.
Terence and Kate.
Yeah, okay. So social enterprise clearly is a huge part of the platform for the Green Party. I mean, obviously, for us, it's about the three things, whether it's environment, economy, and the social aspect. They all have to be working together. We are incredibly fortunate in London to have some amazing social enterprises. My children are involved in some of these social enterprises, and you know, we need to make sure that we keep these in our city because they really add a lot to the culture of our town and what makes it special. So we have some things I'm going to say, like, we'll just treat it as small business. Right now, what we saw with the pandemic was that a lot of the smaller businesses, and this includes the social businesses, struggled with the pandemic because of the closures. And what ended up happening is that the larger businesses, Amazon, Walmart, and the others, really, benefit and had higher profits. What we would like to do is have a look at what the different regulations are regarding regarding business in general, and try to remove some of the red tape that is holding back small businesses and help them to grow and prosper during the, as we go forward with this green recovery after the pandemic. We do see that there is a lot of businesses that are looking at a model that includes like a social and environmental aspect. One of the great things is right here in London, we have the Green Economy London that has been working really hard to make our businesses more energy efficient, include biodiversity, gardens. I mean, this is an amazing program that a lot of businesses should really tap into. It's great for the publicity, but it's great for the overall health, ecological health of our town. And it is in line with our climate emergency action plan that the city has put forward. So we want to partner with municipalities to make this happen for businesses. We would like to have a 50-50 split on the pay share to make businesses more sustainable, and that can be part of including the social aspects.
Nonprofits and social enterprises do such wonderful work. They not only give people that sense of value, but they also contribute so much within our city. I think it's unfortunate that we have seen a lack of attention and a lack of support from the province for nonprofits. You know, it's unfortunate also that, you know, there are so many great and talented people in all of these nonprofits, yet there are roles which are simply in the business of applying for grants or applying for funding. I think we need to make sure that we have more support from the province so that nonprofits are able to put forward their ideas in general, and then when they're approved for funding, can then go through the lengthy and laborious process of explaining how that funding would be used. You know, unfortunately, we saw throughout this pandemic a decided lack of attention for small business from the provincial government. Right from the very beginning, the Ontario NDP had our Save Main Street plan, in which we called for robust investments and supports for small business. However, unfortunately, Costco and Walmart had their lobbyists in the government's ear. And it took the government 9 months to finally have these supports for small businesses. And for many people whose business finances are tied up with their home finances, many people simply did not recover. With the Ontario NDP plan, we are so much in support of small business. We want to continue that support to make sure that people are able to thrive. You know, in the beginning, there were many federal supports, but unfortunately, people were taking a loan. They were kicking the can down the road and just hoping for the best. And that was really an unfortunate predicament to be in. We need a provincial government that doesn't just look after the big players, that looks after the ma's and pa's, the people who have built our communities, the people who have made our communities thrive and colorful and wonderful.
Well, I want to start by giving a huge kudos to Moshe. Handwriting looking nice or not, she's doing a terrific job at Pillar, and I do think, we talk to communities all across Ontario, and London is really known for the leadership in this sector. I acknowledge my bias here. I'm a past board chair of Pillar. I was on that board for 10 years, including when we established Verge, including when we built Innovation Works, but I do believe the organization has really supported the nonprofit sector in thinking big. Some of the recent work that Pillar is doing around pay transparency is transformative, really living this commitment to equity. So we see lots of good things coming out of London. So in some cases, I'm not sure that we need government to have the solution. I actually think we need a mentality shift where we know that the solutions come from people in communities who understand the challenges that they face. We talked about the SDGs earlier. One of the cool ideas there is you can try to solve multiple problems at once. And we could sit here, in 1 minute and 3 seconds. I don't have time to list off all the examples. I even know off the top of my head of there are people in this room who've led transformative things where they're growing a business, they're supporting a need in our community, they're also addressing our climate goals, they're accomplishing many things at once. And so I think it is a shift. Government needs to be a supportive partner. We need longer term funding. For those who are set up as a small business, we've committed to a corporate income tax for small businesses, up to 100% off for 2 years for those who've had more than a 50% loss. So there are a lot of commitments around helping the stability of smaller organizations, but my main message here is I don't think I'm not qualified to be able to answer all of the things that social enterprises can do in terms of problems they can solve. What I can commit to you is that if I'm given the privilege of being the MPP for London North Centre, I would be your loudest champion, and where you've identified a cool idea to solve multiple problems in London at once, we need to sing it from the rooftops as we have been doing for decades and help those solutions be known all across the province. So thank you, Moshe, for your question and the leadership that you're providing.
Thank you for that. So this question is coming from someone in the crowd here, and I apologize, I'm going to do my best with this name. Siddharth Maheshwan. So the question is, reshaping the economy to provide high-wage green jobs is a part of multiple platforms in this election. While this is an admirable venture, the fiscal planning remains ambiguous. Can you elaborate on your plan for this locally and or provincially? We'll start with Terence.
I think that over the past while, we've seen green energy not presented well by the provincial government. We saw investments that were made by the previous government that really benefited corporations over the people that the province is meant to serve. We need to make sure that with our investments in green economy, we're making sure that we're empowering individuals to have retrofits done to their home, because we know so many emissions are created by individual consumers. So in order to do that, that will create a wonderful, robust economy of tradespeople to make sure that they're able to not only perform those energy retrofits, but also enabling people to, take their own stance. We also want to take a look at the ways in which we look at heritage buildings. I've been working with the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, the London branch here. If you look at landfills, 40% of landfills are construction waste. We need to take a look at the current stock that we have and make sure that we are rehabilitating them and treating them well. It turns out that heritage windows, if they're treated properly, can actually have the same energy value as newly manufactured vinyl windows. So it just takes a little bit of effort. I think as well with our Green New Democratic Deal, we're taking a look at building 1 million jobs, because we need to make sure as we pivot away from a carbon-based economy, we need to make sure that there are going to be well-paying jobs that replace those jobs that are going to be lost. We need a just recovery. That needs to be a people-first economy, one where we're paying people properly and making sure that they're not only taking responsibility, but they have the opportunity to build a future and build a life, and also doing the right thing.
Okay, so thank you, Siddharth, for the question. Great question. And we haven't talked much about climate plans broadly. We talked a bit about protecting green space, but the Ontario Liberal Plan commits to reducing our emissions by half by 2030, which is coming right up. That's really soon. It's an aggressive plan, and we have detailed exactly how we would do that. And transitioning to a green economy and making sure that we are, just like we talked about earlier, solving multiple problems by doing the same things. Some things that can produce economic growth while also helping us achieve our climate goals is a big part of that. You will see in our plan, there are some places where government should lead. We are increasing EV incentives for people who want to buy bikes or get into electric vehicles. There's things that we can do to encourage big polluters. We can tax them more and use those funds to invest in things that help all of us live greener lives. But then there's also things where we should follow. So we have committed, sounds like you've taken a look at the platform, we've committed very significantly to a fund that would really support industries where they are making improvements, where they have found new solutions, where they're piloting new technology that grow the economy, that create jobs, but also help us meet those climate goals. And we would support industries in doing that. It is intended to be a self-sustaining fund. So we have this fund, we invest in companies, but it allows it to generate over time. So it's not just the government putting money in, but instead it becomes an opportunity to grow that part of our economy over time. I'm going to point to a few things in London where, again, I do think that we have been leading. The city has a terrific climate plan that commits to getting to net zero by 2050. I think it's well aligned with our provincial plan. And there are people in this community, and I say this again with some bias, I spent a long time working with these folks at City Hall, but who have been pushing on this for a very long time. Carol's been a really active community advocate here too. So there are great things happening in London. As a provincial government, we would not pretend that we have all of the answers. There are things that we know we can do to incentivize people to move in this direction, but we also want to be a supportive partner for those who are creating jobs, protecting our planet, and solving a number of other issues that our communities face.
Okay, thank you. So I would just like to start by saying that under the previous administration, we saw the Environmental Commissioner's Office completely abolished, and the Environmental Commissioner, Diane Sachs, lost her job as Environmental Commissioner. And lucky for us, we got her as our deputy leader for the Greens, and she was the lead author of our climate emergency action plan that we are going to be putting forward, our climate strategy. So it is very ambitious, but it is also achievable. And a lot of that involves like how we are going to deal with getting off of gas and oil. A big part of why we are still so dependent on these forms of energy is because of subsidies. So we would be taking $20 billion that would be put towards subsidies for gas and oil over the next 10 years and put that into building affordable housing. That, of course, is going to create jobs, but we need just not new houses that aren't sustainable. We need greenhouses that are energy saving. We need in municipalities to have enough money to retrofit the buildings that are here, just as Terence pointed out. We have buildings, it is better to retrofit the buildings than build new ones. It is more environmentally effective. So we would be investing $2 billion into municipalities to overhaul their systems so that they can have energy efficiency. We also want to do a 50-50 cost share, helping the municipalities deal with transportation. So that is tripling the number of dedicated bus lanes by 2025, making sure that there's safe cycling infrastructure, safe walking infrastructure. This will all create jobs. And as I pointed out, we do have the plan to fill that position by offering the free tuition for 60,000 students and offering them one free year of work, guaranteed year of work afterwards to fulfill those positions. All of this is going to help cut drastically our climate emissions and make us more resilient going forward.
Thank you. I'll ask a question now that comes from our members. And it's really focused on predictability. One of the complaints of business over the last 2 years has been a very pronounced lack of predictability. And it caused considerable disruption in the business community, and not just the business community, but people's lives. So it's a very common complaint. One thing that is sort of looming on the horizon, which is sort of tied to this, is, for example, Ontario's basic beer tax, which is scheduled to automatically increase on March 1st, 2023, if not deferred by the Ontario government. Now, this is not only going to have an impact on brewers, it's going to have a knock-on impact on small business, and in particular, our restaurants. And of course, consumers. It's tied to inflation, so it may well be an enormous increase. So the question is your party willing to commit to no new business tax hikes of that nature if elected? And I think we're going to go Kate, Carol, and Terence.
Sure. So certainly businesses and the Chamber's members are feeling this. I think we're all feeling this. It's been a really difficult couple of years, lots of disruption, lots of unpredictability, and I think way beyond just small businesses, people are looking for a government that communicates a clear plan. This was part of why, when we built our platform, it was really important for us to lay out line by line, year by year, what things cost, what we're planning to do. You know, it's kind of unadvisable, I think, to have a almost 100-page long platform, but it was really important for us to be very clear about, if we are given the privilege of governing this province once again, exactly what we would do. So I cannot commit that there would be no new business taxes. In fact, for businesses that have grossed more than $1 billion, we do think that they should be paying more. But for small businesses, I can do one better. We are committing to a corporate income tax break, a holiday for 2 years for small businesses, and it would be a sliding scale, again, based on their losses over the last 2 years, up to paying no corporate income tax at all. We are coupling this, though, with some things that we know will increase business costs. So we're committing to a living wage. Again, I think we should be done with the idea that you can just pay people the same amount. It is different depending on where you are. It's more expensive to live in London than it used to be. It's more expensive to live in London than it is to live in Exeter, Ontario, where I grew up. So we need to be really clear. So you can see from us exactly what we would do over these 4 years, what the impacts would be. Ford repeatedly prioritized big business. We've talked about this before. It's unfortunate we don't have the Conservative colleague up here today to speak to this, but he has repeatedly prioritized big boxes as we've seen small businesses close their doors, and we want to flip that around. We would decidedly prioritize those small business owners that have really put their heart and soul and their time and talent and capital into building what is the greatest job creator in our economy and helping them be able to achieve that stability and get through the next few years so they can get back on their feet.
So we obviously would like to champion the small businesses as much as possible. Really, big box retail is not the way to be going. First of all, you have to drive there. Often you're driving from one store to another because it's not safe if you have small children to even walk from one store to the other. This is not sustainable. It's not building communities. What makes communities special are the small businesses that are there. So when my family comes from British Columbia to visit, I am not taking them to go to Walmart, and I am not taking them to go to Indigo. I'm taking them to the small shops. I'm taking them to the craft breweries that are here. What we need to do is look at other ways that we can tax things, but that is not affecting our small businesses. That's why we want to have the task force to talk with small businesses, what are the most onerous policies right now that are making it difficult for you to operate. So if we are thinking about taxes going forward, we would be taxing, as I said, speculators, so that we can make sure that people aren't owning 3, 4, 5 houses at a time. We would be taxing the empty buildings so that we can make sure that our downtowns are vibrant and not a bunch of empty buildings that are sitting there, so that when our tourists are coming, they're not passing by these empty storefronts. We want to change the zoning laws so you can actually have small stores within your community. When we were growing up, there used to be small shops like within your neighborhood, and my mom would give me money and I'd go up and buy milk and come back, and I could spend a little extra money on the candy if I had change. Those got eliminated. We need to have those again in our communities so that people can walk to a store, that they don't have to drive to a big location. It's better for the environment if we are creating these 15-minute communities. And the heart and soul of that is supporting the small businesses there. So placing a lot of taxes and barriers and other red tape on small businesses is not the direction that we want to go going forward.
You know, London North Centre is home to London's brewery district with, you know, the Brewing Co-op, Anderson's, Union 10 Distillery, and we need to make sure that we're supporting businesses like those with expanded small business support grants. You know, throughout the pandemic, you know, I've been trying to promote shopping local as much as humanly possible, making sure we get that message out that we're supporting our friends and neighbors. And as it turned out, one day I was stopping by Zatar's on Adelaide Road, and I ran into Nadia. And she had, it just so happened that she had applied for the Ontario Small Business Support Grant, which was incredibly difficult for people to receive. And fortunately, my office was able to lobby for her, reach out to the provincial government, and to make sure she got that funding so she could keep her doors open. So many businesses throughout the pandemic applied for that and were eligible for that, and yet were turned down for reasons that they were never informed of. There was no a process to apply or to appeal. And it's been incredibly unfortunate to see so many people. But we've also seen so many intelligent and diverse businesses being able to pivot and sort of change their offerings. And as a result, they might have fallen into multiple categories for the Ontario Small Business Support Grant and were thus turned down. We need a government that is going to take on big businesses. You know, we're talking about making sure the billionaires pay their fair share. We also need to make sure everyday folks are not feeling the squeeze. We know about gas prices going up. We know about groceries going up. We need to make sure that everyday families who are earning less than $250,000 have a tax freeze. You'll get that from the Ontario NDP government, but also increasing investments in healthcare, mental health, long-term care, universal dental, universal pharmacare. Regular everyday families and businesses will all be able to feel a little bit of relief from those NDP plans.
Thank you very much. So this next question, again, I'm going to try with the name here, Emily Voyer. So this question actually is a very good one. It's going to pivot a little bit. For me personally, I advocate for changes in this, both professionally and personally. So this is a good one. This year, Western's community was shaken by several acts of sexual and gender-based violence. How will you work to improve supports for survivors and push post-secondary institutions to put stronger preventative measures in place? So I think we'll start with Carol there.
Yes. So we do have a dedicated part in our platform to address this issue, as it is something that is absolutely crucial that we address. It's not just happening here at Western. I know that it's happening across the province. So we want to create programs that have a real survivor-focused center that they can talk about what is necessary and needed. We need to put more money into our rape crisis lines, into our shelters, into other areas where people can get the supports that they need. A large part of the problem is that it takes a while for people, if we're looking just at the survivors right now, it takes a while for people to process what is happening. We need to make sure that the supports are there when they're ready, and that is why we also have a standalone mental health care plan, which would be tied with OHIP so that it is not inaccessible to people due to the cost and due to the time that they have to wait. So we want to make sure that, you know, mental health care is not a nice to have, that it is a need to have. It is also really important to deal with education starting at a very young age appropriate, going through so that we don't arrive at a situation where, the sexual violence happens. Kids need to know what consent is. They need to understand what is acceptable and what is not. And we need to start that with education to change behaviors. We're really lacking in that at the moment. We need to rethink how things are going. So we would really look into how we can invest in those areas to make sure that we have proper supports for survivors, that we are educating people in the workforce, we're educating people in the schools, in the universities, about looking for the signs, helping those that need it. I know that Western has worked very hard on this, and we have a long way to go, but we can get there.
The events that occurred at Western, really, I think, made everyone take a pause. But I think we as a community need to make sure that we are listening to survivors. We need to make sure future programming is survivor-centric and trauma-informed. With investments that need to be made in the post-secondary field in terms of mental health, we have a tremendous number of students that come from outside jurisdictions, and we need to make sure that there are mental health supports here for them, that there's an availability of counselors. I was pleased to work with the University Students' Council as well as the Safe Campus Coalition to bring forward petitions in the legislature to call upon the provincial government to make sure that they are making those investments not only in post-secondary, but ensuring that they're updating the Ontario curriculum. Students need to learn, as we've just heard from Carol, that they can learn about consent in a developmental and age-appropriate way so that everybody knows what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like. Because, events such as these can change a life forever, and we need to make sure that they never happen in the first place. Part of that as well is making sure that there's adequate funding for rape crisis centers. We've seen that the Ford government has unfortunately cut many of those. We also need to make sure that we are allocating a large portion of affordable and supportive housing for women who are fleeing domestic abuse. Throughout the pandemic, we've heard that home is the safest place to be, but there are many women who are trapped in situations unable to have any place to go. We need to make sure that we are investing in those supports because as we recover and exit the pandemic, there is going to be a wave of women who are trying to seek our safety, and we need to be there to support and help them.
So the first week of school this year was really, really rough, right? Many of you are students or connected to the campus community. There was such excitement about being back together on campus, and then the events during O Week. I remember teaching my first class of the term and having female students come up to me, tears in their eyes, talking about what they had seen online on the weekend, feeling a real fear. And for me personally, I was an undergraduate student almost 20 years ago now at Western, and we were talking about this then, right? Western was sort of regarded and sometimes even celebrated as being, Playboy magazine once ranked Western as being one of the top party schools, right? It was often one of the things that defined the Western experience, the country club university, things like that. This is a culture problem in post-secondary institutions generally, but I think one that we all need to really own at Western. I am really impressed by this generation of student leaders, and I know we had, I see Jessica, one of the USC reps, she's departed, but she was here earlier today. We're seeing real leadership from particularly female leaders on campus right now, working closely with organizations like Innova. But this is a deep problem that goes way beyond the campus community. The Ontario Liberal Party agrees with a lot of what we've shared here. More funding for organizations like Innova, making sure that kids are learning about consent. We also have really ambitious commitments around women fleeing domestic violence, making sure they've got supportive housing and so on. But more than that, I really do think we need to be thinking systemically about the patriarchy and misogyny. I'll take the end of my answer here in a slightly different direction. Part of that is politics, right? For a long time, we have seen politics dominated by a single demographic, older white straight men who've made amazing contributions, but that does not reflect the diversity of this country. And if we want to change big cultural systems, it needs to start with who we see lead, the things that they care about, the commitment they have to building equity and inclusion in a real meaningful way. And it starts to change the decisions that we make. So it's a Western problem, it's a post-secondary problem, but it's also a problem that we as a province need to grapple with as well.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and we can just squeeze it in. You're kind of lucky because you're going to dodge some really good ones here. Rich out there from Huron wants to know how you're going to pay for all these ideas. But that's not the question I'm going to ask.
OntarioLiberal.ca/platform.
That's not the question I'm going to ask. It is. What I want to ask is about inflation. Obviously, massive problem. It's affecting businesses, it's affecting consumers, it's affecting families. I mean, it's absolutely skyrocketing. Plus, there is a widespread suspicion that there is a lot of crisis sort of capitalism going on, and a lot of people are benefiting from some of the crises that we're facing. Fabled profits being experienced in some quarters, and the governments don't seem to be doing anything about it. So the question for you here is, how is your party going to ensure that families and businesses in London continue to afford to do business and can afford to put food on the table? And we'll go with Terence, Kate, and then Carol.
You know, first and foremost, we have seen that everyday families have felt the squeeze for far too long. We see gas prices going through the roof. We would have the Ontario Energy Board regulate gas prices to make sure that they actually come down, not one of the election promises that we heard in 2018. You know, we also need to make sure that we're addressing cost of living through things like universal dental care, universal pharmacare, things that will save families a tremendous amount of money, especially those without benefits. You know, it's really been such a difficult time for a lot of folks, and you know, we need a government that's actually going to make sure that their interests are first and foremost. You know, also making sure that students can graduate debt-free will be a game changer for a lot of people. You know, I think as well, we've seen governments that have prioritized big business. They've looked after their wealthy insider friends. We need a government that is going to put everyday people first and foremost, making sure that their interests are being addressed. You know, that's what you'll get with an Ontario NDP government, because we're so squarely focused on making sure that individuals whose household incomes are $250,000 or less will have a tax freeze. You know, too often we see, you know, government money going and being spent. And quite frankly, myself, I'm tired of seeing government money spent without any real cost-benefit analysis, without knowing whether it's achieving its desired result. I don't think that people mind taxes necessarily, but they do mind when governments are wasteful of their money. We want to make sure that we have an excellent social safety net, making sure that we have a minimum wage going up to $20 per hour, and making sure that there's social assistance rates where people aren't forced to live in abject poverty.
So one of the interesting things about being a candidate is you get the absolute privilege of spending hours and hours every single day knocking on people's doors and hearing what they have to say. And I will tell you from past elections and also volunteering on other people's campaigns, usually there's kind of different issues that come up depending on where you are, depending on kind of the demographic that you're speaking with. In this election, in this city, in this riding right now, it does not matter what neighborhood you are in. I would tell you about every other door mentions cost of living. And that is true when we are in social housing buildings, and it's true when we are in our most affluent neighborhoods. So gas, groceries, housing, everything is going up way faster than incomes, and everyone, I would say, is feeling the squeeze on whatever the life is that they're leading right now. They are feeling more and more of a pinch. So I think anyone sitting up here to tell you that we can control inflation may not understand how this works. These are big global pressures, but there are things that governments can do to interrupt the impact that it has, especially on people who are struggling the most. So things like committing to a living wage, things like making childcare $10 a day, things like making transit rides $1, which, by the way, we have committed to all across Ontario. So if you want to take a London Transit ride or you want to get on the go, even though it takes 4 hours right now, which is a whole other thing that needs to change. Nobody is using that right now because that needs to change, and we would fix that. But that would mean getting to Toronto is $1, which will disproportionately benefit people who are lower income or people who need to find that little bit of extra wiggle room in their monthly budget because they're feeling that pinch. So I would encourage you, for those who want the details, Richie, if you want to see the how we pay for it, we have a very good answer to that. Go to votecate.ca. You can see idea by idea, cost by cost, year over year. And you will see repeatedly deliberate interventions to say those that are doing the best need to be sharing more of that wealth. And for those who are struggling, here are concrete ideas, more than 300 ideas in the platform, concrete ideas that will help people be able to manage that pinch that we know everybody's feeling right now.
So yeah, I would concur with Kate. Pretty much every other door you knock on, everybody is saying affordability, affordability, gas, groceries, it's so expensive. I was taking care of my parents just recently and went to get groceries for them, and a pound of butter where they were living cost $10, and a single can of tuna cost $6.50. Now, when we think about the food banks and people are donating, I've volunteered for the London Food Bank before, and of course the top item you need are proteins. When a single can of tuna costs $6.50, that is not getting donated because people can't afford to give that. So we really need to think about how we can decrease prices for people, because at the moment there are decisions that are being made between rent and food. So I did mention that we would have the Healthy Lunch program for children across all of Ontario. This is incredibly important right now because we need to make sure that our kids are having good nutrition. It affects their health and well-being for the rest of their life. It also affects the outcomes for their jobs, because if you don't have fuel to fuel your mind, you are not going to be able to do well in school. We have, as I said, been committed since September of 2021 to double ODSP. Right now it is at rates that are absolutely not acceptable. And as I said, with these prices right now, how in the world can anyone afford to feed themselves when they're only getting $1,169 a month? Some people are saying they only end up with $7 at the end of the month with the amount of money that they are given just for their food. So we need to look at how can we make life cheaper in terms of bills, so that right now we've got, in the winters are extremely cold, and particularly those that are most vulnerable are living in homes that don't have good insulation, that don't have good windows. We would give grants of up to $15,000 to fix that problem so that your bills can drastically drop and you don't get in this cycle where you're constantly paying so much for energy that you can't save up to fix your homes. So those are just some of our ideas.
Well, thank you so much. That's the end of the, excuse me, I should have had some water up here, but I don't think they allow us to bring anything in here.
I think so.
Right? No, okay, so you just have to
Soon.
basically suffer. Thank you so much for this Q&A and for your remarks. You've been a moderator's dream. Nobody had to be cut off. I mean, you were perfect. You were on time. Your comments were on point. I'm going to say that I think London is going to suffer a tremendous loss here, because I think we would be benefited if all three of you were in Parliament. I think we could all agree that, if Parliament was conducted in the manner in which you three have conducted yourselves today, with decorum and focus on issues, we would be in great shape as a democracy. So thank you so much, and give them a round of applause. I'm now going to invite my board member, Teresa Van Ray. She's the co-owner of Van Ray Farms and the Whole Pig. I can attest, I've been to the farm. It's unbelievable. So make sure that you do take some time out to visit Teresa up at the farm.
Thank you so much, Graham, because you did take most of my words, so I'm not sure what I'm going to speak. No, I'm kidding. So,
You just have to.
there we go. So thank you, candidates, and thank you all here for choosing to come this morning. I know you all could have chosen somewhere else, and this speaks of the importance of why we're here today. Huron College, thanks for hosting us in this beautiful theater, and to our sponsors, Labatt and Swan Public Affairs, for helping to make this event happen today. We've already introduced myself, so I don't have to do that now. As Graham mentioned, I'm also a member of the Board of Directors for the London Chamber of Commerce. As a business advocacy organization, I am thrilled that the Chamber was able to offer this event today to help give our business community a better understanding of the priorities of each of our candidates here today. It is worth repeating, we appreciate each of you for putting your names forward. This as a candidate to represent all of us at the Ontario level. We recognize the honor and the responsibility that this entails. So this concludes the formal portion of our candidates forum. However, if you would like to stay and chat and get some of the answers, the questions that we're not able to put forward today, get some answers, our candidates are available for that. Thank you, and we look so forward to seeing you at the next Chamber event.